We're back with a special Easter Sunday discussion. I'm joined by Democratic Congressman of Missouri and United Methodist pastor Emanuel Cleaver, daughter of the Reverend Billy Graham, Ann Graham Lotz, His Excellency Bishop William Lori, Archbishop Designate of Baltimore, the executive editor of Random House and author of American Gospel, God, the Founding Fathers, and the Making of a Nation, John Meacham, and Republican Congressman of Idaho, Raul Labrador, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, commonly known as the Mormon Church. Welcome to all of you. I know I want to get it out right out front. I'm doing something you're not supposed to do, and that's mixing politics and religion, and on Easter Sunday to boot. But I wanted to have this conversation because it seems to me the role of faith in our national life as a national discussion, but certainly the role that it plays for our national leaders seems overly ripe in this campaign season, particularly. And that's where I want to start, because the criticism from Republican candidates for the presidency against this administration has really boiled down to this issue of whether faith is under fire. Listen.
I think there is in this country a war on religion. I think there is a desire to establish a religion in America known as secularism.
This administration is waging war on religion. If he wins re-election, he will wage war on the Catholic Church the morning after he's re-elected.
The president has reached a new low in this country's history of oppressing religious freedom that we have never seen before.
John Meacham, play referee here. Is this accurate?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think religion has been part of the American experience from the very beginning. We came over for God and for mammon. We were in search of gold, but also of religious liberty. You cannot run for president without a plausible faith story. And I think in a nation that is overwhelmingly religious, perhaps more in terms of polls than observance sometimes, I don't think there's a war on religion. I think that there is a robust disagreement about a lot of important issues. And because religious faith, like economics, like partisanship, like geography, is an intrinsic part of human experience, there's always going to be a religious component to debates over issues.
And Archbishop, when you have an issue of the role of government in a healthcare decision, like insurance actually funding contraception, you have this tension, and that's where a lot of that criticism came from. But what is the nature of this war? Do you agree with those men?
What we've seen, the bishops of the United States have seen, is an erosion of religious liberty. Perhaps we wouldn't use the word war. I wouldn't underestimate, however, how engaged we are in the struggle and how determined we are. But there has been, the HHS mandate is certainly the most urgent of these underminings of religious liberty, but there's many other
But explain
things
why
that are
you
going
think
on.
it undermines it. I mean, what the actual mandate actually does, and why you think that's an erosion of freedom.
Well, first of all, we have the government imposing its definition on what religion and religious organizations are to be, and it's an inward-looking definition. If you're only serving your own, hiring your own, inculcating your own doctrine, you're exempt. But the minute you serve the common good, which is what all of our organizations do, then you're not exempt. Then you are subject to having to provide, fund, and or facilitate services which are contrary to the Church's teaching.
Well,
and I don't think we should have to do that.
Congressman Cleaver, as a Democrat but also a minister, how do you come down on this question?
Well, I think we need to take God off the ballot. This issue surfaces every 2 years, but for sure every 4 years. And I think people exaggerate certain positions in order to help themselves politically. There is no war on religion in this country. This country would not even tolerate war. But people realize clearly that religion causes us to write, to fight, to even die. And so it has a grip on us that nothing else holds as tightly. And so people realize that, and so they exploit it during the political season. I think that's something that we've got to get away from.
But Ann Lotz, in this particular case, Was this the government going too far, or was this a government saying, look, if you want to be an insurer and you want federal funds, there's a path that you must follow?
You know, I would have to confess I'm not an expert on that, and I would come very close to siding with Archbishop Lori, because I believe it is a beginning. It's just a very small step in a direction that I think could become something more serious. I'd like to go back to your opening statement about the importance of religion in politics, or because we look at our president or look at our leaders as having a religious example for us. And the thing that I think is so important, the Bible says that the beginning of wisdom is fear of God. And I believe one of the greatest lacks in our nation today is that genuine fear, reverence for an almighty God. And that's where wisdom begins. So we have a lot of knowledge, and you can go on Google and you can pull up all sorts of stuff, but to know how to use the knowledge in a way that benefits the majority of people in this country, that's what I look for in a president. I want my leader to have a fear and a respect and a reverence for God.
Well, I want to come back to this expectation of faith among our leaders in a moment, but Congressman Labrador, let me get you into this. We are on the precipice of an historic moment for Mormons in this country, and that is that Mitt Romney, as a Mormon, and somebody who has a very significant role in the church, looks like he's going to become the Republican nominee. And Congressman Cleaver talked about the need to take religion off the ballot, but here you had Orrin Hatch from Utah, Senator Utah, saying that the Obama administration, the campaign, is going to throw the Mormon church at Mitt Romney and make this an issue. Do you agree with that? And how would he do that?
I think the media is going to do that for the Obama campaign. But let's talk about your original question real quick. There is an attack on religious freedom at this point. And if you look at what the Obama administration did with the contraception issue, they first set up a rule that was contrary to some religions. Then they decided that they were going to reform, they were going to change that rule. And then when they changed that rule, they really didn't change the rule. They actually just said that they were going to change the rule. And they wanted to have this conversation about contraceptives, which nobody was talking about at the time. If you remember, the first time they talked about contraceptives was George Stephanopoulos in one of the debates. He's the one who brought it up. There wasn't a single Republican candidate who was talking about that issue. And all of a sudden, we start talking about an issue that wasn't even a campaign issue, and then we started on an attack on religious freedom. I think there clearly is. But going back to your question about Mormonism, everyone in politics is going to have some sort of role, is going to be influenced by their faith. Whether it's Emmanuel by his faith, whether it's me by my faith. And I think we can't talk about having politics void of any religious faith, because then what you're saying is you're asking people to not be who they are.
But I'm asking you about this very specific charge. You have the senior senator from Utah saying that the Mormon church is going to be thrown at the Republican nominee who is a Mormon. In what way? And you just said you think the media will do it. I mean, let's talk about what you mean.
Doing it. You look at your own network, MSNBC, you have Lawrence O'Donnell. It's just saying some really nasty things about the Mormon religion, about the founding of our religion, that it was based on some guy just waking up some morning and deciding that he had an extramarital affair, and that's how the religion was founded. There's some really nasty things already being said by your own network, by NBC. There's many other people that are going to be talking about these things, and I think what we need to realize is that everybody's faith origins are peculiar, if you look at any one of us. And we need to realize that what you need to look at is the man, Mitt Romney. I have not endorsed Mitt Romney, but it clearly looks like he's going to be the nominee for the Republican Party. We need to look at his life and the things that he has done, and he's had a very, very good life.
John Meacham, this question of whether his Mormon faith will become an issue, whether the president, who has had to face down questions about whether he is a Muslim, which he's not over time. Does this become a big issue as we move through the campaign?
I'm going to offer a counterintuitive argument. Yeah. I wonder if, because of those two premises you just set out, I wonder if perhaps explicitly religion will be less important in the fall in the general election than at any time since 1972, before Roe versus Wade really transformed the landscape. Because it's not frankly, in either candidate's interest to get into theological debates at this point. It's never in a candidate's interest, I would say. I think the great thing about the country has always been that we have created a public sphere in which religion shapes us without strangling us. And that was the great achievement of the founders. And it's something that from generation to generation has been respected. Ms. Lotz' father is one of the great figures in this. Billy Graham plays this enormous role in our culture, but in a non-sectarian, non-divisive way. And so that's why when we talk about wars on religion, we talk about this eternal conflict. Let's think about it. Where do we go in moments of national crisis or mourning? We go to the National Cathedral. Where do people pray at inaugurations? There's a tolerance, there's an acceptance, there's a hunger for a kind of religious conversation. And I think that the more generic it is, and I understand the theological problems with this, but the more generic it is, the more effective and the more accepted it is. And I just wonder if you get to October, whether it's in either candidate's interest to be bringing up specific religious issues.
This is not a theological debate. We are not trying to get the government to stop something or to start something. What we are talking about is the government forcing religious organizations to do something that is against their teaching. This is a religious liberty fight. We recognize there's a lot of opinions about abortifacients and sterilization and contraception. What we're saying is that we're not just houses of worship. We are places that try to live our teachings as we serve the common good. We have this freedom now. We've had it for generations. Our teachings have been accommodated, but now they're not being accommodated. This represents a definite diminishment of our freedom to provide our services according to our rights.
Archbishop, you're arguing still this issue of contraception and the Obama administration's rule, which they, of course, would argue is there's an exception provided for and an accommodation provided for that the insurance would pay for it directly. But rather than go down that road, which I don't think will convince you, I want to stay on this sort of broader question, Congressman Cleaver, which is, in the case of Mitt Romney, but more generally about someone's faith, as a person of faith that Romney is and as a Mormon, it's the core of who he is. As a missionary for 2 years, as somebody who was a bishop in the church, which is the, correct me, Congressman, if I'm wrong, the equivalent of being a priest because it's lay-led, a very close association with the church. He doesn't really talk about what guides him so powerfully. Isn't it fair for both scrutiny, questions, because there's so much ignorance about the Mormon faith, but also to understand the man, to understand his religious journey?
Well, look, I think all of us who claims some kind of connection to religion, and if we are in government, we are informed by that religion, and we are, in many instances, regulated by it. We don't have to make an announcement every day and go out and wave a flag. Mm-hmm. It comes out of our somebodyness, and but I have to talk about it. When I was mayor of Kansas City, we had our church opposed, the Methodist Church opposed gaming. I said from the very beginning, if I'm going to do what my church says, then I should have campaigned on as a Methodist running for mayor. I did not, and so therefore I eventually signed that into law. I'm not going to vote for Governor Romney, but I am more concerned about Washington's religion of Confucianism than I am Governor Romney's religion about Mormonism. So I think we've got to stop this. It's not healthy for the nation. We've completely forgotten Article 6, Paragraph 3, which says there shall be no religious test. And I think we've got to try to prevent our country from doing that. E pluribus unum.
I understand that, but we live in the real world here, and evangelicals, of which you are one, are deeply suspicious of Mormons and the Mormon faith and do not consider them to be Christians. And you have the likelihood now of a Mormon Republican nominee. Is there not an opportunity for more national understanding and more of a discussion about the Mormon faith when you have the standard bearer of one of our two major political parties of that faith?
There will be, but when you just